15. Je donne à présent la parole à Monsieur Leonardo Santos Simão.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Excellence, Monsieur le Président du Conseil, distingués membres du Conseil, j'ai l'honneur de présenter aujourd'hui le rapport du Secrétaire général sur la situation en Afrique de l'Ouest et dans le Sahel, les activités du Bureau des Nations Unies pour l'Afrique de l'Ouest et le Sahel, UNOWAS. Permettez-moi tout d'abord de féliciter la présidence française pour son leadership au sein du Conseil pour le mois de janvier en ces temps troublés. Au cours de ces derniers mois, la situation en Afrique de l'Ouest et au Sahel a été marquée par des évolutions contrastées. D'une part, des progrès significatifs ont été enregistrés en matière de consolidation de la démocratie, répondant ainsi au désir de changement porté par une jeune génération de plus en plus exigeante. En revanche, la situation sécuritaire et les défis liés à la gouvernance demeurent des préoccupations majeures, ayant un impact significatif sur la vie des communautés et menaçant constamment d'anéantir les progrès dans d'autres domaines. Distingués membres du Conseil, l'élection présidentielle au Libéria a démontré la capacité des institutions à organiser des scrutins crédibles et à mettre en place des gouvernements dotés d'une légitimité constitutionnelle. En effet, le 15 novembre, suite au déroulement du second tour d'une élection présidentielle très disputée, le président sortant George Weah a félicité son adversaire et appelé à l'unité nationale. Ce fut un moment politique déterminant pour un pays où les souffrances de la guerre civile sont encore très présentes dans les mémoires. Au Sénégal, l'enthousiasme quant au choix du prochain dirigeant du pays lors de l'élection présidentielle du 25 février prochain et qui pourrait bien être une des plus compétitives est également palpable. Le Ghana a également démontré sa constance démocratique avec l'engagement de deux principaux partis dans un processus transparent et l'élection de leur candidat à la plus haute fonction de l'État en préparation des élections générales prévues pour le mois de décembre de cette année. Distinguished members of the Council, at the same time, however, both Sierra Leone and Guinea-Bissau saw confrontations pitting elements of the security services against each other. These events, coming in the wake of electoral processes, reminded of the need to build the credibility of institutions and processes of democratic governance in a sustained manner, failing which underlying fragilities are always likely to resurface one way or the other. In Sierra Leone, it is to be hoped that the spirit of the agreement for national unity signed in October between the government and the main opposition party, as well as ECOWAS' ongoing reconciliation efforts, will help overcome the current tensions. In Guinea-Bissau, intra-institutional tensions, culminating into the dissolution of the parliament for the second time, seems to close a window of opportunity for much-awaited essential reforms. Going forward, a constitutional review that clarifies the division of powers is essential to definitively break the cycle of instability plaguing the country. In the central Sahel, we also witnessed another unconstitutional change of government in Niger in July, creating a belt of military-led governments in the Sahel, adding to the substantial governance, humanitarian, and security challenges that we have been facing in that region. Arguably, respect of basic freedoms, notably of assembly and expression, is indispensable for building trust between the citizens and institutions. Regrettable arrests of journalists and human rights defenders, as well as restrictions to internet access and freedom of the press, amongst other concerns, again fueled perceptions of a decline in the civic and political space in some countries. Honorable Chair, distinguished members of the Council, on 14th November, the Malian armed forces recaptured the northern city of Kidal, while more consequential steps to bring basic service to the north are expected, reinstalling a governor after 10 years of absence of the central state seems to mark another important step in the terrain of Mali's overlapping conflicts. In this context, however, high levels of uncertainty surrounded the status of the agreement for peace and reconciliation in Mali, and crucially, of the political transition that it has yet to see a date for its pre-agreed elections. Meanwhile, insecurity remains prevalent in large parts of the country, including attacks on military camps and civilians, with the swaths of the country currently blockaded by terrorist groups and rising humanitarian needs. While human rights groups in Burkina Faso denounce a forced enrollment of critics into the security forces, a large-scale attack on the northern city of Djibo after years of blockades and deprivation has again highlighted the challenges faced by the transitional authorities to reestablish security across the national territory. Against this background, the humanitarian situation in the Sahel remains dire. Despite marginal improvements in some areas, the number of people in the entire central Sahel region requiring humanitarian assistance and protection has increased by 8% compared to 2022, now reaching 34.5 million people. Critically, the period saw a significant rise of refugees into Mauritania, where screening capacities of arrivals are stretched, requiring a preventive approach as much as more support. Distinguished members of the Council, allow me to echo this Council in paying a tribute to the peacekeepers who paid the ultimate price in the service of MINUSMA, as well as to the Malian people for their resilience. In the context of the withdrawal of the mission, discussions are currently ongoing with the UN headquarters and Malian authorities towards a mutual understanding of UNOWAS' role, especially relating to residual political issues. Amongst other, an election support mission will soon be visiting Bamako. As we move into a post-MINUSMA Mali, we need to take stock of that decade-long experience and draw lessons required to inform a fast-approaching future. As a legacy of MINUSMA, the UN will continue to maintain a key role in support of the Malian people, but remain committed to deliver. All the while, the closure of MINUSMA, the departure of the foreign forces, and the uncertainty about the G5 Sahel following the withdrawal of Burkina Faso and Niger portend a reconfiguration of regional security coordination mechanisms. Conversely, coordinated operations under the multinational joint task force have contributed to some tenuous stabilization in the Lake Chad region. At this juncture, I would also like to congratulate the Council for adopting a framework for assessed funding for African Union-led peace operations. This is imperative as reflections are underway on how to reorient UN peace and security tools to meet contemporary threats and challenges. In this regard, the possible deployment of an African Union standby team as part of addressing regional security needs is to be welcomed. Therefore, it is my hope that the full implementation of the Security Council Resolution 2719 will happen soon. Moreover, I'm encouraged that ECOWAS is taking steps to fully operationalize its Priority Action Plan 2020-2024 to eradicate terrorism in the region, using its own mandatory contributions to make a decisive move stemming insecurity in the Sahel, preventing more suffering, and bringing children back to school. Honorable Chair, distinguished members of the Council, as the number of children out of school remains disturbingly high, with thousands of schools closed due to insecurity, compounding the deficit of education systems already thinly stretched before, in November 2023, UNOWAS held a colloquium on the nexus between security, access to education, and governance in the Central Sahel and West Africa, in pursuance of the Security Council Resolution 2601/2021. Going forward, the deliberations offered an entry point for a multi-stakeholder roadmap to provide emergency education as the most important lever for children to shape their future and build their countries. As one example of UNOWA's efforts addressing root causes of exclusion and bad governance, the Conference of the West African Bar Association, held in August 2023, organized with ECOWAS support, came at a time of proliferation of allegations of decrying a lack of independence of the judiciary, gravely impacting on perceptions of the rule of law and the credibility of institutions. Long dormant, the event revitalized the association, setting in motion a revision of its statute and removing barriers to its functionality. In this spirit, we will equally continue engaging ECOWAS on the formalization of the Community's Forum of Ministers of Justice. Recognizing the commendable steps that the Gambia has undertaken, advancing the implementation of the recommendations of its Truth, Reconciliation and Reparations Commission, the process of national healing will remain incomplete as long as the Gambia remains under the framework of its 1997 Constitution, which is currently the only one within ECOWAS that does not contain presidential term limits. As I call on partners to generously support the transitional justice process, I wish to urge political actors in the Gambia to ensure adoption of a new constitution, a process that has been on hold since 2020, before the end of the year, as foreseen by the government. Distinguished members of the Council, against the multiple challenges, UNOWAS will stay the course and deploy its capacities using good offices, urging humanitarian access, and promoting the observance of human rights and the rule of law. We are making deliberate efforts to enhance our collaboration with the resident coordinators and United Nations country teams, as only when we are all speaking with one voice, interacting with the governments and partners, can we have a meaningful and sustained impact. Allow me at this stage to commend our colleagues from the UN agencies, funds and programs present in the field and delivering steadily in face of extremely challenging circumstances. Above all, as the United Nations Office for West Africa and the Sahel will remain steadfastly fixed on fostering dialogue. Amidst the stalled transitions processes, we have used our unique comparative advantage by effectively leveraging our communication channels with all parties, which has been greatly appreciated by major stakeholders. In this vein, we have contributed to a more conducive environment to overcome the impasse, and I welcome the decision by ECOWAS authority to resume dialogue with the respective transitional authorities and to consider reviewing sanctions. We will continue advocating for dialogue to accelerate a return to constitutional order, reflecting citizens' aspirations, and ensure transparency, inclusivity, and respect for human rights in the management of transitional processes. Distinguished members of the Council, a few weeks ago, the COP28 ended, marking another step towards tackling climate change. As we all know, though least contributing to global warming, fragile ecosystems, especially in the Sahel band, are particularly affected. As evidenced by situations in the Lake Chad Basin and Liptako-Gourma region, the negative impact of climate change, such as prolonged drought and unpredictable rainy seasons causing flooding, on peace and security in the West Africa and the Sahel, is a lived reality we cannot ignore. Findings of UNOWAS climate risk assessments indicate that climate change reinforces security risks by exacerbating intercommunal conflicts, increasing social tension, and contributed to displacement, unfair distribution, or unequal access to natural resources, rural, urban migration, violence, and delinquency. Invited to dedicated events in Dubai, UNOWAS has demonstrated how these often overlap with the spread of insecurity that we are currently witnessing, as well as dry out and lands fall shallow, while floods have devastated other areas. It is often women who are bearing the brunt of the vagaries of climate and conflict. It is imperative that women take their place in the instances of decision-making. I therefore salute the effective application of affirmative action commitments and policies in elections last year in Benin, Cote d'Ivoire, and Sierra Leone, which substantially raised the representation of women in legislative bodies. In this vein, I would like to call on parliamentarians, other stakeholders, and partners to advocate as an important first step for the passing of respective legislation, notably in the Gambia, Ghana, Liberia, and Nigeria. Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, je voudrais une fois encore remercier le Conseil pour son soutien à l'exécution des missions de l'UNOWAS. Conformément à notre mandat, nous continuerons à travailler de concert avec nos partenaires régionaux et internationaux pour consolider la paix, la sécurité et la démocratie en Afrique de l'Ouest et au Sahel. Merci beaucoup pour votre aimable attention.
Je remercie M. Simão.